Welcome to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, the founder and managing director of The Sales Doctor, and I'm joined today by Jenny Stilwell, who has just written a fantastic book called The 7% Club, and I happen to have a copy right here, 7% Club. Jen, congratulations on your book, The 7% Club, and also your podcast of the same name. Tell us a little bit about your career, just so we can get to know you a little bit, the work that you do, and why you wrote this book.
Okay, thank you, Ingrid. Thanks for the introduction. I guess my career was fairly textbook for a while in the beginning. You know, I started out as a grad fresh out of uni and ended up in the sales and marketing stream, more on the marketing side, and, ended up at general management level, then CEO, a CEO role in the dot-com boom of a software company, which is ironic because I knew nothing about software technology, and that was the stream I came up in. I was surrounded by technical people all the time, and that was a very interesting time running that company during a crazy time. And then after that, I decided to take a break, and I started my own business advisory firm. So I was working with small businesses, but, sort of high six figures, low seven figures, and helping them to grow. And I guess my general management experience gave me the ability to help them with a lot of areas of their business. And also, having been a CEO myself, I could help them with more strategic perspective. So I did that for about 10 years. And then over the next 10 years, I was asked by two of my clients at different times to step in and run their companies, the last of which was going to be about 6 months, but it ended up being 5 years. And I took that company through the first year of COVID, which I was thinking about it before. I'm really glad I had that experience, even though it was a hideous global situation for everyone. But from a business perspective, I think it's the first time I never, ever, along with everyone else, I didn't have any reference points at all. So it was very interesting navigating that and what I learned from it. So, and then after that, I took some time out and I finished my book, and now I'm back doing what I do, and that's helping clients to grow their businesses. And the reason I wrote the book was I'd started writing a book about strategy and strategic growth. And I found, while I was doing the research, I found this statistic that said only 7% of businesses in Australia grow beyond 2 million in turnover, which I couldn't believe. It just seemed like a bizarre statistic. So I had a look at comparable figures for the US and the UK. I couldn't get Canada, but I had a pretty good cross-reference, and it was similar. There were real similarities, whether it was £500,000 or 1 million US, it was a similar statistic. And I thought that was really interesting. So that became the focus of the book.
Yeah, that is fascinating, that regardless of the currency, it's actually more about the number rather than, what that really means relative to currency and exchange rates and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an eye-opening figure. It really is.
So before I ask you the next question, I really want to dive into that a little bit more. So what did you discover was some of the key reasons behind that?
Well, it's really interesting because a lot of the companies, I think, that would have been listed in that statistic were not necessarily operating entities, so you can take those out of the picture. A huge percentage of those businesses would have been owned by people who had no intention of ever going near that level of growth. You can have a very nice lifestyle with a certain type of business if you're doing $500,000. Depends on the business model. So a lot of people didn't want to extend themselves and go that far. They wanted a nice lifestyle, but they didn't necessarily want the struggle of the growth. So there's all sorts of reasons, but for those who, as I refer to in the book, decide to go for the peak, there were some key challenges. There's kind of 3 key areas of challenge that come up. And I know this from years and years of working with clients and from my own experiences as a CEO. So the 3 areas were, number 1, as your business grows, there's a lot more complexity. And I think this is the point where people really start to feel out of control, and there's a lot more happening in their business and they can't keep it in their head anymore. So that's a huge challenge to work out how do I kind of wrestle this beast to the ground and take control of it. And then there's the people component, bringing people on board, and that's often not done very well. And of course that gives rise to a whole other host of issues. And it's all around that need to simplify and structure their business because of the increasing complexity. And again, they don't have the reference points. You know, they haven't been a CEO before. They haven't run a business that big. They might have previously been a brand manager in a big corporate, and they've started their own business and created brands, but that's not running a company. So that's a huge challenge. And the next is in the area of being able to step back from the business and become the leader. So making the shift from business owner to CEO. And sometimes that never happens and they remain stuck. But once they get through that, then I think everything changes. It's a whole mindset shift. It's a business shift. It's a structural shift, shifts with people. And then the final piece is making the shift from having a fragmented focus where, you know, you follow the bright, shiny objects, you know, we can do that or we could do this, or following things because you can, not because it's the best strategy at the time. So it's really at that stage about being able to upscale in a strategic and a profitable way and having that focus. So they're the 3 big challenge areas that can stop companies from growing beyond 2 million.
I could talk to you all day about that because, you know, some of the businesses that I work with, I can sort of see that real struggle of stepping back. And I really appreciate how you say, you know, making that shift from business owner to CEO to someone who's running a company. And then you talked about the mindset shift and then all of the structure that has to happen underneath that. And I wonder, you know, which comes first? Is it that they have that mindset shift first and then they're able to put in the structure that's going to support that new way of seeing themselves and their organisation? Or is it that it's not until they take the action that then they start to sort of see themselves and their organisations differently?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think it's the latter. In my experience, they have to navigate through the complexity and see some impact of changing how they do the business, you know, getting their head around the numbers and really understanding what's going on in the business and looking at the people they have around them in a different way. You know, often there'll be employees that have come on board since day one and they start off in an admin role and then the company gets bigger and the next thing you know, they're called general manager of X or business manager, and you're like, hang on a minute, this person isn't qualified to do that. And they're actually not very happy in that role because they're not doing a good job. So it's not until the owner of the company can actually have a more objective look at the business and start to see the benefits of getting their head around the numbers and putting better processes in place so they can trust that people will do what needs to be done without them getting involved in every single thing. And once they start to see that, it's kind of an aha moment. Then you can slowly see the shift happening. But most of them hang on fairly tight for quite a long time. And again, that's probably because they haven't had that bigger company experience of managing a team and knowing your role as the leader versus the person in the thick of it doing the thing. So I think that tends to be the sequence They need to see some results and some impact first, and they go, okay, I kind of get this now.
Makes a lot of sense. But in order to do that, I guess what I'm hearing here, you mentioned the word trust, that it is an act of faith, to put those things in place to begin with, and take their hands off it a little bit and not get involved in every single thing, like you said. So,
it's a huge act of faith. It's a huge leap.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, coming back to the book here, because I loved this book, and thank you again for allowing me I was lucky enough to read the manuscript prior to publishing. And for me, as I might have said to you, it quickly became one of those books that, it's not just a how-to guide for small businesses, but it had so many examples of businesses putting into practice your principles, the things that you guide the clients that you work with, the strategies, the structures, the processes, the getting their heads around the numbers, really solid models there, and how they've integrated those concepts into their own businesses and the things that they struggled with. But for those who may not yet have read this book, I mean, I'm starting to see it everywhere in airports and everywhere. What are some of the key premises for businesses who, want to go beyond the $2 million mark in revenue?
Well, I think the first thing is to know, and it sounds cliched, but it's necessary to know where you're taking your business. And I always say growth for growth's sake is not the right strategy. And people often, they hit 1 million, so the next obvious target is 2 million, and then they want to be 5 million. And it's like, well, how far do you want to grow? And it really depends on what their drivers are. I was talking to someone the other day who has a sizable business, and he was struggling with growing the business further, and I was kind of asking him what the challenge was around that. And he said, well, I want to spend more time with my family, and if I grow it any further, I won't be able to. And I said, but that's only if you leave it structured the way it is now and your role in it doesn't change. If you change some things, you can grow the business further and still spend time with your family. And that was an option he actually hadn't considered, because to him, growth was more of his time and more demand on him. So I think you need to be really honest with yourself and really clear about what you want. Do you want a nice lifestyle? Do you want to have a business that makes a good contribution in whatever area it is? Or do you want to really scale something and sell it, at some point in the future for a big multiple? They demand quite different strategies. So I think the first one really is to just not go after growth for growth's sake. Yeah. So that would be the first thing. And then the second is to try and take a more strategic look at what you're doing with your resources.
Right.
Look at what is costing you money, look at what the returns are, look at, acquiring clients. Are you acquiring the right clients? Are you using the resources in the right way? Have you got a lot of activity, a lot of busyness in your company, but you're not necessarily bringing the right things in? So these are the sort of strategic questions that owners need to give some serious thought to, because it's not until they decide that they can direct their team and garner their team around them in the right way.
I mean, it's simple what you're saying, but getting to that point is not easy, No. and again, getting clarity over what I really want. That's one of the biggies, isn't it? What do I really want from this business, and being honest about it, not just saying a particular outcome because I think that that's what my business partner wants, or that's what my family wants. What is it that I'm trying to create? Because without that level of clarity, I imagine that then you're just not, you're going to go round in circles, and you're not going to get the level of progress that you could otherwise get. It sounds so straightforward, Jenny, but you must come across owners all the time who really just wrestle with that first question. Where are we taking the business?
Oh, absolutely. But it's the same in life, isn't it? If I said, what don't you want in your life? Say, well, I don't want to work with clients I don't like, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that. But if I said, well, we've got a blank canvas here, just paint that perfect picture. What do you really want? We all go, well, I don't know. Like we might be able to say the first few things, but if it's really a blank canvas, what do you want to create? It's a very hard thing to do. And I think we all tend to continue in a business, particularly a service business, without, production and so on. We can tend to stay in a business too long because it's what we know how to do and we're good at it. But sometimes it doesn't bring you fulfillment. And it's very hard to make that call and say, this business isn't making me happy anymore. It's a good business, but it's not doing it for me. And that's a really hard call to make. And most people don't make that until it's too late and they're full of resentment about their business and all the rest of it.
I can't relate to that at all.
No, I can't either. No,
I've
never been through that.
No, yeah, oh gosh. So the times that we're living in at the moment, Jen, I would say that they're unprecedented, not because we haven't seen hard economic times before or talent shortages before, because we have, but we haven't necessarily seen the types of challenges that we're facing at the moment all at once. So we've got talent shortages, and I would argue sales talent shortages that we're probably not going to be able to solve in the next 5 to 10 years. That's certainly what some leading economists are saying. That we've got tighter economic conditions, which are forcing businesses everywhere to scrutinise every purchase decision. They're worried about, okay, if I do this, what else can't I do? And if I do that, what sort of return am I going to get? And then there's that trust deficit that I think has come as a direct result of the lockdowns and the past 3 years, where people are looking around and saying, organisations, institutions, things that we normally would have been able to freely trust, perhaps we don't trust anymore. And when we've got talent shortages and people voting with their feet about who they want to work for, and we've got customers also doing the same thing, it's really tricky. Who do they want to belong to, and how do we become worthy about that? So if businesses, and small businesses especially, are to thrive rather than simply survive in the next few years, what's your take on how they need to behave differently in order to drive revenue, profit and growth?
Look, it's a big question, and it's a whole of business response. I was talking to a client the other day, and we were developing their strategy for the next 12 months, and they are really strong on customer service. They always go above and beyond. They're very clear on their boundaries of who they will and won't work with and why. And same with their suppliers. And we were talking about a competitor in particular, very, very ruthless competitor who is very focused on price and undercutting everyone just to win the business. But their customer service is appalling. And, we were just saying, like, my client is known for their apart from the quality of their product, but for their service. And it's a very personal approach. And, I said, you don't really need to worry about this competitor, because everyone knows what that company is like. If they choose to go with them because they want the lowest price, that's fine. But if they want some service or something goes wrong, they're going to bounce away from there and come to someone like you. So just keep focused on what you're doing. And I think that's a real advantage for small businesses, because they can have that more personal approach. They can get to know their clients really well. They can really understand and know their clients better than bigger companies, just because of their size. And I think when you've got the whole company focused on the client and what you can do for them and how you can continue to add value, that changes everything. It's not about sales, it's about really looking after your clients. I just think that's so important, and it's such an advantage. And, you and I could talk about that forever, because it goes deep, it goes wide across the company. I mean, you could effectively, if you did have a shortage in your sales team, you can make that up across the company with how those people treat the customers, and they all need to plug in at different levels. I used to call it a spider web. So you've got an account manager or a salesperson plugged into their contact, but you'll have the support people or the service people plugged into their respective contacts. You'll have the CEO plugged in at the CEO level, and you'll have all different points. And if you're all focused on that customer and delivering the same level of service and understanding that you're there to add value to them, it's not single point sensitive anymore, and it's a whole of company, whole of customer approach. Small businesses can do that easily, and that's a huge competitive advantage.
That is a huge competitive advantage, and I love how you said that, a single point of service. And I think a lot of businesses, simply leave it to sales. That's sales's role. That's the anything to do with customer. It's either customer service, sales, marketing. Might be brought into that, account management. But for many businesses, for example, they can't necessarily afford a sales team either. It's not appropriate for them to have salespeople going out. And you talk about that whole of organisation approach, to the customer, which I absolutely love. I love how you talked about it being like a spider web of all of the different touch points. So from all of the organisations that you've worked with, do you have some of the examples that perhaps are really good ones of organisations that aren't necessarily large organisations that have done that whole of organisation approach to really loving their customers?
Look, I've been thinking about this, and in short, the answer is no. However, I think some do it with their clients by default, because then it's almost a cultural thing of how the owner of the company feels about the customers and how they communicate with their team about the importance of the clients, and we need to go over and above. And even, let's not forget the people who refer business in. You might have 10 clients, but 4 of them have been referred to you by someone. Don't forget that someone out there. You've got to look after those people too. That's really important. So I think they've done it by default, but there's a huge opportunity to start doing it by design. And it's interesting because there are companies now that have either made a shift. They've still got retail stores, but they're shifting, of course, to that online ordering model, who are doing it well. That whole process of, getting the order out really fast, and they have a returns process, and there's real people you can email if you have a problem, and it just flows well. There's other companies I've seen that are a pure online model, but they've got their marketing and their branding and their processes and their customer service working so well that you feel like they know who you are. Of course they do, because they've got all your data, but they're working with that, and they're real people you can email, and they're friendly and they're on brand, and you go, I like dealing with this company. There's no face to it. It's just the brand, but they're doing it really well by design. So I think if smaller businesses can start looking at that by design as opposed to by default, they could really not only grow their revenue, but retain their customers, have greater customer tenure, grow the value of their clients. A whole host of benefits would come out of it.
Are there any lessons there for, smaller businesses are more agile and they have that closer connection, more direct connection perhaps to customers, but what are the lessons there for larger organisations?
Well, look, I haven't worked with larger organisations for a long time, and I know that they are supposed to be data-driven, but I think all I would say is this, that you have to inspect what you expect. So these large organisations may think that this division is behaving a certain way with their customers, or acquiring this level of customer data that their marketing team is then working with. I'd just check that out from a customer perspective and have that experience yourself and see what's happening. Whether you're a bank or whether you're whatever you are, don't forget to go out there and see what your customers are really experiencing. Get out of your office, just go out and act like a customer and see what comes back, because I don't think it's going to be great all the time. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for corporates to get a lot closer. They've got all this data, but I think perhaps they've gone too far on the data side. They've lost that human connection. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me on that front.
Oh, gosh, I really agree with that. And I love how you just said that, inspect what you expect. Finding that out. I've recently had a really good experience, I must say, with Telstra, moving house with the modem, just speaking to people. I don't know what they've done at Telstra, but I must say it's been extraordinary, because I've actually had people go off script, just talk like a normal human being when they've done something that they shouldn't have done because of the automation that they obviously have in place. They've apologised, they've referred back to it, they've made sure that they've closed things off. It's been really heartening, actually, to see one of the behemoths of Australian industry starting to perhaps recognise the need and the desire for customers for that personal connection again.
Remarkable, isn't it? But, that is amazing. And if you found that, I'd dig a little deeper, see what they're doing.
Absolutely. So finally, I just wanted to come to the fact that, there's a fair bit of data out at the moment. I haven't seen any Westpac business sentiment data, but NAB's consumer sentiment isn't terribly optimistic, and small businesses feel economic changes sooner than their larger counterparts. And so, when we think about smaller businesses, they're often financing those small businesses personally, so they feel it personally. And like you said, they're far more directly connected to their customers. So we talked a little bit before about how businesses can use their smallness to advantage. But how else can they really make sure that they're letting their customers know that they matter across the whole business? Like you kind of talked to it before, but I want to come back to that and perhaps round out today's beautiful conversation with that, about all of the things that small businesses can do to make sure that their customers matter to them, because they do matter, but how can they let the customers know that they matter?
Well, often a starting point with the work I do is to have my clients do a version of the Net Promoter Score. So, most of them have never done anything like that. So, we just go out there with maybe 5 or 6 really simple questions on a scale of 1 to 10. How relevant is our business to your direction over the next couple of years? That's a really good question because, your client might be changing direction, or they might be changing direction in a way that you become a must-have, not a nice-to-have. So to do that, get the number, get the score. It could be a 6. So what do we need to do to make it a 10? And that's where you get the gold. So once you capture all of that, it's really important to consolidate all the data, go back, show your clients, thank you for your time, because most people never go back and the clients think, well, I just gave up half an hour of my time for nothing. And show them the results and say, look, these are the consolidated results and this is what we're going to do as a result of it. And there may only be a couple of things, and they may not be bad things like bad customer service, but it might be we'd really like to know, it could be a design company or a contract manufacturer of something. We'd really like to know what the trends are, what's coming out of Europe or the US, so they don't have to do all the research. Or it could be a consulting firm's clients saying we'd really like to know some insights in this market space. So, okay, well, let's deliver more value. Let's do that. So you do the consolidated look at, okay, this is what all our clients are saying, but then you can drill down and take that into, well, client A, client B, client C, and do a very specific account plan for each, involving the different aspects of the company. So, finance, we need you to don't issue the invoice before we've delivered the goods. That'd be a start. But really have a look at what is happening in each area of the company to deliver the right level of service where you've got the feedback from the client. And even if you don't go down the path of doing that sort of research, just pick a handful of clients, maybe your top 5, and just drill down into what's our end-to-end process with these clients. How are we doing what we do? How are we following up? What's been happening? What activities happened in the business in the last 3 months to service this customer? And do a bit of an internal deep dive. So you can go out and ask your client, or you can do the internal dive. You could do both together. But, you really need to dive deep to understand and then action it. That would be my advice.
I think that's extraordinary advice. And, I think the reason that a lot of companies don't do those things is perhaps because they're frightened of what they might find out, which is crazy because customers are still feeling it regardless of whether you know about it or whether you don't. And if you know about it, you can do something differently. But your point there that I loved was going out, finding out, how relevant we are to their business in the next, 2 to 5 years, coming back, looking at the consolidated data and then making changes based on what you're seeing and not just leaving it there, but going back and saying, thank you for that half an hour of your time, really grateful. This is what we're doing about it. Based
that is
on
so
what
important.
That was the bit that really, knocked me between the eyes. I just thought that was really strong. And then you said, breaking that down then into your different customer categories and saying, okay, based on all of that, what does that mean for this customer? What does this mean for this customer? And what's our account plan for each of those across the business? So you said about, okay, if finance, is looking through that lens, what are all of the aspects when it comes to finance that they need to do differently that's going to be, that's going to matter to that customer? What about, this component or marketing, or it might be distribution or delivery for this customer? And then strengthening that with an internal deep dive too. Oh, Jen, how can people find out how to work with you? Because so many people must be knocking on your door at the moment, and I would imagine that, you know, you're quite discerning about the types of businesses that you love to work with as well.
Yes, I am. I'm on LinkedIn, Jenny Stilwell, 1L in the middle, 2 on the end, or my website is jennystilwell.com.au, and all my contact details are there.
And where can people buy your book?
At all good bookstores, Ingrid. Online and in the street. And at airport bookstores.
That's my experience too. Someone that I knew saw this book because I'd been raving about it, and picked it up at the airport at one of, I think it was Waterman or Watermark or one of those bookstores, and held it up and took a photo of herself with the book. Because it is just such a fantastic book, great reading, and people need to know about you.
Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for today.
You're welcome.